Chapter 1. The First Habit. Making yourself smaller to keep others comfortable. You've worked hard to become the woman you are today. You've fought through seasons where your voice was silenced, your boundaries ignored, and your worth overlooked. And somewhere in that journey, you decided, no more. You began to grow. You began to expand. Your light grew brighter. But here's the quiet danger. Once you step into that light, the world doesn't always applaud. Sometimes it squints. Sometimes it shifts uncomfortably. Sometimes it wishes you'd go back to the version of you that didn't take up so much space. And without even realizing it, you begin to oblige. You start making yourself smaller, just enough to keep the peace. And with each small step back, your light dims. Not because you've lost it, but because you've tucked it away. Why this happens, the hidden psychology. From a Jungian perspective, this habit often emerges from shadow loyalty, a deep unconscious bond to the identities you once held and the roles you once played in the lives of others. If you've been the peacemaker, the caretaker, the one who never caused waves, then expansion feels like a betrayal of that role. The ego tells you, if you shine too brightly, you'll be alone. If you take up too much space, you'll lose your place. So you dim your light, not because you doubt your worth, but because you fear the cost of being fully seen. The subtle ways you shrink, it doesn't always look dramatic. In fact, it often looks polite. You soften your opinions, so they won't sound too much. You downplay your achievements, so no one feels threatened. You accept being interrupted instead of holding the floor. You pretend you're fine with less than you want. Each choice feels harmless in the moment, but together they slowly pull you back toward the smaller life you've already outgrown. The emotional toll. When you shrink yourself for too long, you start to feel a quiet ache, the sense that you're betraying something essential inside you. Your body knows it. It feels like heaviness in your chest, or like you're speaking half-formed sentences when your heart has entire stories to tell. This isn't about arrogance or ego. It's about integrity, living in alignment with the fullness of who you've become, reclaiming your full presence. The woman you've worked to become doesn't apologize for existing in her full size. She doesn't collapse her energy to make others more comfortable. She knows that those who truly love her will adjust to her light, not ask her to dim it. Reclaiming your full presence starts with noticing when you're shrinking, and then asking yourself, who am I doing this for? And is their comfort worth the cost of my light? Because the truth is, the world doesn't need a smaller version of you. It needs the woman who made it this far, exactly as she is. Chapter 2. The Second Habit. Staying in rooms you've outgrown. You can tell when a room no longer fits you. Not because the people in it are unkind, not because the walls have suddenly changed color, but because something in you feels compressed. The conversations feel smaller than the questions you're carrying. The rhythms feel predictable when your soul is hungry for surprise. The air itself feels thinner, like there's less oxygen for who you are becoming. And yet you stay. Why we stay longer than we should. From the outside, staying looks like loyalty. From the inside, it often feels like safety. These are the rooms where you learned your first steps, found your first voices, felt your first sense of belonging. Leaving them can feel like erasing part of yourself. From a Jungian perspective, this is where the archetype of the good daughter or the faithful friend takes over. The part of you that believes your worth comes from staying put, from not abandoning the places and people who were once part of your foundation. But here's the shadow. When you stay in rooms you've outgrown, you slowly stop growing. You adjust your posture to fit the old space, and in doing so, you teach your body to forget its own height. The psychology of outgrown spaces. Our psyches are wired for familiarity. Even if a room no longer matches our desires, The predictability of it feels soothing because the unknown demands something of us. It asks us to adapt, to stretch, to risk not knowing what comes next. But staying too long has its cost. You silence parts of yourself to match the tone of the room. You limit your dreams to what the room can understand. You keep explaining yourself to people who aren't listening with the same depth. In time, the room doesn't just hold you, it holds you back. The emotional signs. You've outgrown a space restlessness. You feel bored even in moments that used to excite you. Constriction. You feel physically smaller or quieter when you're there. Disconnection. You no longer feel seen even when you're surrounded by familiar faces. Unspoken grief. You feel sad at the thought of leaving, but sadder at the thought of staying. These signs aren't betrayals. They are invitations, signals from your inner life that it's time to move toward what can hold you now. The shadow fear of outgrowing. Sometimes staying isn't about love or loyalty at all. It's about fear. Fear of being misunderstood by those who once knew you best. Fear of finding out that the world outside the room is less welcoming than you imagined. Fear of being truly responsible for the freedom you've worked for. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But privilege always comes with responsibility. And sometimes that responsibility is to walk away from what no longer serves your becoming. How to step out without burning bridges. Leaving a room you've outgrown doesn't have to be an act of destruction. It can be an act of expansion. You can carry gratitude for what the room gave you, the friendships, the lessons, the shelter, while still choosing to find a place that meets the size of your soul today. It begins with one question. If I believed I belonged in a bigger room, what would I do differently this week? Maybe you start a conversation with someone who inspires you. Maybe you say no to an obligation that no longer lights you up. Maybe you simply give yourself permission to imagine a life beyond the walls you know. The woman who chooses the room that fits, the woman you've worked to become, understands that love is not proven by staying small. She knows that true belonging can only exist where she can bring all of herself, not just the parts that fit the old room's expectations. She chooses spaces where her voice feels free, where her ideas have room to breathe, and where her presence is met, not managed. And when she leaves an old room, she doesn't see it as abandoning her past. She sees it as honoring her future. Chapter 3. The third habit, forgetting to feed the light. You've fought for your light didn't appear out of nowhere. It wasn't handed to you in a quiet, peaceful moment. It was born in the fire. It grew in the dark, slowly, stubbornly, relentlessly, until it had the strength to guide you out. You fought for it. You protected it when no one else could see it. You built a life around nurturing it. But here's the truth. No one warns you about. Even the strongest light can fade if you stop feeding it. The slow fading, it doesn't happen overnight. It's not one big decision. It's the small, unremarkable moments when you choose urgency over presence, noise over silence, others' needs over your own renewal. You tell yourself you'll rest later. You'll create later. You'll tend to your inner life once the list is complete. But later never comes, and without even realizing it, the woman who once felt alive begins to run on the memory of her own vitality. The psychology of neglecting your inner light. From a Jungian perspective, your inner light, the self, is the organizing center of your psyche. When you're connected to it, life feels coherent even in chaos. But when you neglect it, the ego starts running the show, prioritizing external validation, productivity, or keeping up appearances over true soul nourishment. This isn't laziness. It's forgetfulness. You forget that the light isn't a permanent fixture. It's a living thing. And like anything alive, it needs care. The signs you're starving your light. Your creativity feels dry even when you have time to work. You feel reactive instead of intentional. Your emotions feel flat. as if they're wrapped in a thin layer of fog. You struggle to feel gratitude for what you once prayed for. These aren't signs of failure. They're gentle reminders tend the flame. Feeding the light. Feeding your light is deeply personal, but it always involves presence. It might be writing in a journal, taking a long walk without your phone painting, praying, meditating, or simply sitting in stillness long enough to hear your own voice again. It's not about adding more to your to-do list. It's about reclaiming the moments that make you feel most alive. And sometimes feeding the light also means protecting it from people or situations that drain it. Saying no without guilt. Choosing solitude over noise. Refusing to explain your joy to those determined not to understand it. The woman who keeps her flame. The woman you've worked to become knows that her light is sacred. She doesn't let the demands of the world starve it. She tends to it as carefully as she once tended to her healing, because she understands the journey didn't end when she found the light. That was just the beginning. Keeping it alive, letting it grow, letting it warm others without burning herself out is the real work of a lifetime. Your light is not an accident. It is the result of years of becoming, of saying no to what would diminish you, of choosing to walk through fire when it would have been easier to disappear into the dark. But the truth is, it's not enough to have fought for your light once. You have to keep choosing it. Every day. In the way you refuse to make yourself smaller to keep others comfortable. In the way you step out of rooms you've outgrown even when the air outside feels strange. In the way you keep feeding the flame you worked so hard to ignite. Carl Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But privilege is not passive, it's active. It asks for your attention, your courage, your devotion. So I'll leave you with this question. What is one way you can choose your light today? Share it in the comments, not just for you, but for the women who will read it and remember their own. And if you know someone who's been dimming her light without realizing it, send her this video. Sometimes all we need is a mirror held up to remind us how brightly we were meant to shine. You've worked too hard to fade quietly. This is your season to keep the light alive, and the world is better for it.